abandoned on the night of my wedding, and the sounds of the midnight changed everything.
My name is Diana, and what I'm about to tell you today will shock you just as much as it shocked me on the night that was supposed to be the happiest of my life. Picture this: my wedding dress stained with dirt, makeup smeared by tears, barefoot in the cold corridors of a 5-star hotel. Not because of romance, but because I had just discovered my husband and my best friend of 10 years together in my mother-in-law's room. But that was only the first part of a story that goes far beyond betrayal, because what happened next, what life still had in store for me, that will truly leave you speechless. So subscribe to the channel right now, because I promise you in the next few minutes.
I remember it as if it were yesterday, the sun spilling golden warmth over my skin, the air thick with the scent of blooming roses mingled with a faint, sweet hope. That hope, the fragile kind that seeps into your bones when you sense a lifelong dream swelling painfully close to becoming real. For me, that dream had a name: Raphael. We had known each other for nearly a decade by then. Raphael wasn't just my boyfriend or my fiancé. He was the constant melody to my life's song, the soul to my story. Our journey began almost by accident, in the kind of way that felt inevitable looking backward. We were part of a tight-knit quartet: Raphael, me, my best friend Aline since high school, and her boyfriend. Together, the four of us constructed a bubble of shared secrets, laughter, and youthful promises. I can still hear Aline's laughter slicing through the quiet of any ordinary day, a mischievous, bright sound that I once trusted more than my own instincts. She had a way of turning even the bleakest moments into something mischievous, often with jokes that hovered at the edge of discomfort. I remember one night vividly. We were nestled into the dim corner of our favorite little bar, the kind with worn wooden tables and a flickering neon sign. We were playing pool, cups of cheap beer sweating between our fingers. She glanced at Raphael, then purposefully at me, and teased with a grin. "I don't get why you're so in a rush to have kids. You're lucky. I don't want any. And if he ever tried to trade you for me, I'd know what to do." I laughed, pushing my unease down with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Aline, come on. You're my best friend." But the glint in her eye didn't feel like a joke. A small, unknowable chill crawled beneath my skin. Days turned into years, and life, unpredictable as always, unfolded in its own way. Aline's relationship ended after 9 years, broken under the weight of her controlling mother-in-law's constant meddling, a drama I was too young and naive to fully understand. Meanwhile, Raphael and I confronted our own challenges. A sudden financial hit forced me back to my parents' house, a move I hadn't anticipated but accepted with quiet dignity. Raphael's discomfort with my changed circumstances was clear, though he never voiced it aloud. Instead, in a gesture I mistook for love and steadfastness, he proposed. I took his ring as a precious symbol of unwavering commitment. His mother, however, was a different matter, a cold presence who never quite approved of me. The wedding was less a celebration and more a battleground, but I believed it was proof that love could overcome any obstacle. I foolishly thought my dreams had come true that day. The estate on the Virginia hills was a picture-perfect backdrop for the fairy tale I wanted so badly to believe. I remember walking down the aisle, the gravel crunching beneath my shoes, my heart thudding so hard I thought it might burst. My father's hand was steady in mine, his eyes shining with pride and unspoken worry. There were so many faces watching, loved ones cloaked in smiles. At the end of the aisle stood Julian, my rock for so many years, and a man whose presence comforted me even when my own strength faltered. And then there was Aline, my maid of honor, beaming a smile so radiant that I couldn't fathom the storm behind it. The reception sparkled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the sweet notes of a string quartet drifting through the air. Perfect moments passed too quickly, and soon the crowd thinned, and Raphael and I retreated to our bridal suite. A room designed for intimacy, illuminated softly like a cocoon just for us. I wanted those first hours to stretch infinitely, just us, wrapped in love and promise. But the moment the door clicked shut, the light flickered and dimmed. I noticed the tension immediately. How Raphael sighed deeply, dropped his shoes without meeting my gaze, and laid his watch on the nightstand with a weight that seemed to pull the air out of the room. When I reached out for a hug, his body recoiled as if startled. "I'm tired," he muttered, his voice flat and hollow. He didn't look at me, didn't say more. Instead, he retreated to the twin bed in the corner and turned his back, the breadth of the silence swallowing me whole. That night, I lay awake in my large, lonely bed. The scent of fresh flowers mocked my despair, soft reminders of a celebration that had turned bitter. I tried to tell myself it was nerves, exhaustion, something that tomorrow's light would wash away. But as the hours slipped into the dark quiet of early morning, a faint, muffled sound jolted me upright. His bed was empty. My heart pounded as the sound came again. A muffled moan, the creak of soft movements down the hall. It led me toward my mother-in-law's room, the one supposed to be empty. Naked feet shivering, I stopped just outside the door, hand trembling on the cool wood. I held my breath. Soft laughter, quiet whispers, the unmistakable sound of a woman's voice, and then the sound of his deep voice, whispering her name in gasps, a name I knew like my own, yet now poisoned with the sting of betrayal. Aline. The floor dissolved beneath me in a shattering free fall. The life I had painted in such bright colors toppled into shadows. My wedding day, the culmination of all my hopes, had twisted into the first chapter of my darkest nightmare. I don't remember leaving. Just the cold stone beneath my bare feet, dew wetting my skin, and the unbearable weight of silence that was louder than any scream. I was no longer the girl in a wedding dress. I was a ghost shedding her skin, stripped bare of illusions. When I found my parents in the quiet dining hall, the remnants of dawn sipping through stained glass windows, their faces lost the morning calm the moment they saw me. Dirt-streaked dress, mascara melting down cheeks, heart broken open. I didn't speak. My silence roared louder than words ever could. But they knew. They always knew. My father's arms wrapped around me, strong, solid. A fierce shield in a world suddenly unsteady. No words were needed, only the fire of silent rage and unconditional love. They never tried to stop me. Because sometimes, resilience is forged in the fire of walking away. Julian and Aline never came. Their silence, cold, absolute, was the severest apology I could accept. Cowards fleeing their own collapse. I left behind more than a man and a friend. I left behind the girl who believed in fairy tales and forever. I was no longer a bride. I was a survivor. The weeks that followed the wedding were a blur of legal papers and hushed conversations. The annulment process moved swiftly. My father's lawyer, Marcus, was thorough and merciless. "We'll make sure he gets nothing," he assured me one gray Tuesday morning, his silver hair catching the light filtering through his office windows. "The prenup you didn't sign works in your favor now." But the legal victory felt hollow. What haunted me wasn't the division of assets or the dissolution of vows. It was the systematic dismantling of my entire support system. Aline had been woven into every corner of my life for over a decade. Our mutual friends now became casualties of war, forced to choose sides in a conflict they barely understood. Sarah, who had been my college roommate, called me 3 weeks after the wedding. Her voice was strained, careful. "I don't know what to believe anymore," she said. "Aline says you're spreading lies about her and Raphael. She says you had a breakdown and imagined everything." The gaslighting was so audacious it took my breath away. "Sarah, I saw them. With my own eyes. But she's pregnant, and Raphael seems so happy. They're saying you've been unstable since your financial troubles started." I hung up before she could finish. That night, I sat in my childhood bedroom, the same room where I'd dreamed of wedding dresses and baby names, and wrote a list of everyone who had chosen to believe their narrative over mine. The list was longer than I'd expected. The isolation was suffocating. Days blended into each other in a haze of daytime television and untouched meals my mother left outside my door. I existed in a cocoon of numbness, protected from the world, but also cut off from any possibility of healing. It was during this dark period that I discovered Raphael had been planning his betrayal for months. A box of my belongings arrived via courier. Items I'd left at his apartment mixed carelessly with things that didn't belong to me. Among them was a phone bill from 3 months before our wedding. The highlighted calls to Aline's number stretched back further than I'd imagined. Late-night conversations that had lasted hours while I slept beside him, trusting and oblivious. The evidence of their deception ran deeper than I'd known. Credit card statements showed restaurant charges for 2 during times Raphael claimed to be working late. Hotel receipts dated weeks before our wedding. Even a jewelry purchase, a necklace I'd seen Aline wearing to my bridal shower, claiming it was from someone special. Each revelation was a fresh wound, but strangely, they also began to fuel something else. Rage. Clean, crystalline anger that cut through the depression like a blade through fog. I wasn't just a victim of circumstance. I had been systematically manipulated and deceived by the 2 people I'd trusted most. My transformation didn't happen overnight. It began with small acts of rebellion against my own despair. On a rainy Thursday in October, exactly 2 months after the wedding, I forced myself to shower, dress, and leave the house. My destination was mundane, the grocery store. But it felt like conquering Everest. In the produce section, surrounded by the mundane normalcy of people choosing apples and comparing prices, I experienced an epiphany. These people didn't know my story. To them, I wasn't the girl who'd been betrayed on her wedding night. I was just another customer, anonymous, and free to be whoever I chose to be. I bought ingredients for a meal I actually wanted to cook. Pasta with fresh basil, ingredients for homemade bread, a bottle of wine that cost more than I'd normally spend. That evening, as I kneaded dough in my mother's kitchen, I felt the first stirrings of who I might become. My parents watched this small resurrection with careful hope. My mother, Elena, had been my silent guardian through the darkest weeks, never pushing but always present. My father, Roberto, had channeled his protective fury into action, ensuring the legal proceedings moved swiftly and favorably. But that night, as we shared the bread I'd made from scratch, they saw something new in my eyes. "I want to go back to school," I announced suddenly, surprising even myself. "I want to finish my business degree." The idea had been germinating somewhere in my subconscious. I'd dropped out 2 years earlier when Raphael and I had decided to focus on his career. A decision that now seemed like another thread in the web of control I was only beginning to recognize. "Are you sure, Mija?" my mother asked gently. "There's no rush." "There is a rush," I interrupted. "Every day I wait is another day I'm letting them define who I am." Within a week, I was enrolled in night classes at the local community college, working toward transferring to finish my bachelor's degree. The routine was healing. The structure of assignments and deadlines gave shape to days that had become formless. But more than that, being in classrooms full of other people rebuilding their lives showed me I wasn't alone in starting over. My marketing professor, Dr. Patricia Reyes, was a woman in her 50s who had started her own consulting firm after a divorce. She took interest in my situation, not the dramatic details, but my hunger to rebuild. "You have something many people lack," she told me after class one evening. "You have clarity about what you don't want. That's more valuable than you realize." It was in Dr. Reyes's class that I met Carmen, a woman 10 years older than me who was finishing her degree after leaving an abusive marriage. Carmen had an air of quiet strength that I envied. She carried her scars like armor rather than wounds. "I can see it in your eyes," she told me one evening over coffee after class. "You're angry, but you're trying to be polite about it. Stop being polite." Carmen became my first real friend in this new life. Someone who understood the particular devastation of having your entire reality rewritten by betrayal. She introduced me to a support group for women recovering from emotional trauma, not traditional therapy, but a circle of warriors sharing battle strategies. The group met every Tuesday in the basement of a church, 12 women ranging from their early 20s to their 60s. There was Maria, who discovered her husband of 25 years had been living a double life. There was Jennifer, barely 19, whose family had disowned her for leaving an arranged marriage. There was Dr. Sandra Williams, a successful surgeon whose medical partner had systematically stolen both her patients and her research. Each story was different, but the pattern was the same. Trust exploited, reality distorted, identity shattered. And each woman was in the process of rebuilding something stronger from the pieces. The anger phase is important, Dr. Williams explained during my third meeting. People will try to rush you through it, tell you to forgive and move on. But anger is information. It tells you what your boundaries should have been. In that circle, I learned that Raphael's behavior had followed a textbook pattern of emotional manipulation. The sudden financial pressure that had forced me to move back home, the proposal that had felt rushed, the wedding planning that had been taken over by his mother. All of it had been designed to make me feel grateful and dependent. Narcissists create chaos to maintain control, Carmen explained. They orchestrate crises and then position themselves as your savior. It keeps you off balance and grateful for scraps of affection. The pieces of my relationship with Raphael reassembled themselves into a different picture entirely. I began to see that Aline hadn't stolen my husband. She'd simply been another player in a game where I was always meant to lose. Armed with this new understanding, I began to dig deeper into the deception. It wasn't just curiosity. It was a methodical investigation that helped me reclaim my sense of reality. If I could map the lies, I could prove to myself that my perceptions had been accurate all along. I hired a private investigator, a decision that horrified my parents, but felt necessary for my own healing. Detective Lisa Morton was a former police officer who specialized in infidelity cases. She was clinical and thorough, approaching my situation like a puzzle to be solved rather than a tragedy to be mourned. You'd be surprised how often the betrayal runs deeper than the client initially realizes, she told me during our first meeting. People who are willing to deceive someone they claim to love rarely limit themselves to just one lie. Lisa's investigation revealed that Raphael's affair with Aline had begun almost immediately after Aline's own relationship ended. The timeline showed a pattern of calculation that was breathtaking in its cruelty. Raphael had been supporting Aline financially for months, paying her rent and covering her credit card bills while I was struggling to contribute to our own wedding expenses. More damaging was the discovery that Raphael had been actively sabotaging my other relationships during our engagement. Lisa found evidence of text messages to mutual friends, casual comments designed to plant seeds of doubt about my mental state and reliability. He had been systematically isolating me, ensuring that when the betrayal was revealed, I would have nowhere to turn. He was building a narrative where you would be blamed for the failure of the relationship, Lisa explained, showing me phone records and financial statements. Classic abuser tactic: make the victim seem unstable so no one questions your version of events. The most shocking discovery came 3 months into the investigation. Raphael had been married before, a detail he'd never shared with me. His first wife, a woman named Isabella, had left him under circumstances that sounded eerily familiar to my own experience. Lisa tracked Isabella down in Seattle, where she was working as a marketing executive for a tech company. She agreed to speak with me over the phone, her voice gentle but haunted. "He told me I was paranoid," Isabella said. "When I started asking questions about the woman he was always texting, he convinced me I needed therapy. He actually had me convinced I was losing my mind." Isabella's story was a mirror of my own: the financial pressure, the isolation from friends, the gaslighting that made her question her own perceptions. She had left Raphael when she caught him with another woman, but not before he'd nearly destroyed her sense of self. The worst part, Isabella confided, was how everyone believed his version. I lost most of our mutual friends, and for years I wondered if maybe I had been paranoid. Maybe I had imagined things that weren't there. Hearing Isabella's story was both validating and terrifying. It confirmed that everything I'd experienced was part of a pattern, but it also revealed that Raphael's ability to manipulate extended far beyond what I'd imagined. Just as I was beginning to feel strong enough to fully confront my past, life delivered another devastating blow. The abdominal pain I'd been ignoring for weeks, attributing it to stress and poor eating habits, suddenly became unbearable. The emergency room visit led to tests, and the tests led to a diagnosis that shattered the fragile strength I'd been building: appendiceal cancer, a rare and aggressive form that had already begun to spread. Dr. Amanda Foster, my oncologist, was direct but compassionate as she explained my prognosis. We caught it relatively early, but this type of cancer is particularly aggressive. We're looking at immediate surgery, followed by an intensive chemotherapy regimen. Sitting in that sterile consultation room, I felt the universe's cruel timing. Just as I was learning to fight for myself, I was faced with a battle for my very life. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd survived Raphael's betrayal only to face a different kind of enemy entirely. My parents were devastated. My mother aged 10 years in the moment she heard the diagnosis, and my father's protective rage had nowhere to direct itself. Cancer wasn't an opponent he could intimidate or outmaneuver. But in that moment of absolute terror, I discovered something unexpected. I was no longer the fragile girl who had crumbled on her wedding night. The months of rebuilding had created something harder in me, a core of determination that even cancer couldn't immediately destroy. "I want to know everything," I told Dr. Foster. "Don't soften it, don't protect me. I need to know exactly what we're fighting." The surgery was extensive, a cytoreductive procedure that removed not just my appendix, but portions of other organs where the cancer had spread. Recovery was brutal, but it was during those long hospital days that I began to formulate what would become my life's mission. Carmen visited me every day, bringing homework from my classes and updates from our support group. "The women are asking about you," she reported one afternoon. "Maria wanted me to tell you that if you can handle everything Raphael put you through, cancer doesn't stand a chance." It was a simple statement, but it crystallized something important for me. The emotional devastation I'd survived had indeed prepared me for this physical battle. I'd already learned how to rebuild myself from nothing. Cancer was just another demolition to overcome. Chemotherapy was a descent into hell that somehow became a journey toward rebirth. Every session stripped away another layer of who I used to be, but it also revealed the unshakable core of who I was becoming. I lost my hair, my appetite, my physical strength, but I also lost the last remnants of self-doubt that Raphael's manipulation had planted. When you're fighting for your life, pretense becomes impossible. You discover what actually matters and what was always just noise. My classmates rallied around me in ways that surprised everyone, including myself. These were people I'd known for only a few months, but they organized study groups in my hospital room and took turns bringing me recordings of lectures I missed. Dr. Reyes rearranged her schedule to accommodate my treatment calendar. "You've become the heart of this program," she told me during one of her hospital visits. "Watching you fight has inspired everyone around you to take their own goals more seriously." It was during one of the darkest periods of treatment that I began sketching out the business plan that would eventually become my legacy. The idea started simply enough. I wanted to create resources for women going through major life transitions, whether due to betrayal, illness, or other unexpected devastation. "What if," I wrote in a journal I kept during treatment, "there was a company dedicated entirely to helping women rebuild their lives? Not just emotionally, but practically, helping them develop new skills, start businesses, create financial independence." The concept evolved as I researched during my recovery periods. I envisioned a comprehensive platform offering everything from business mentorship to therapy resources, from career training to legal assistance. It would be called Phoenix Rising, a name that felt both personal and universal. Carmen brought her laptop to one of my chemo sessions so I could start researching similar organizations. "You know," she said, watching me type weakly but determinedly, "most people use cancer treatment as a time to rest. You're using it to plan world domination." She wasn't wrong. The combination of physical vulnerability and mental clarity created by the treatment had given me a focus I'd never experienced before. Every day I survived was proof that I could overcome anything, and I wanted to use that proof to help others discover their own strength. My recovery from cancer treatment coincided with my graduation from the business program. Walking across that stage, bald but radiant, felt like the first public declaration of who I was becoming. My parents wept in the audience, tears of relief, pride, and amazement at their daughter's transformation. Dr. Reyes had arranged for me to present my business plan to a panel of local investors and entrepreneurs. Phoenix Rising had evolved from a journal sketch into a comprehensive proposal for a multi-platform company dedicated to women's empowerment and life reconstruction. The presentation was scheduled for a Thursday morning in November, almost exactly 1 year after my cancer diagnosis. I stood before the panel of 5 successful business leaders, 3 women and 2 men, and told my story with a clarity that surprised even me. "I'm not here asking for your pity," I began. "I'm here offering you an opportunity to invest in something the market desperately needs. Every year, millions of women face life-altering crises: divorce, death of a spouse, serious illness, job loss, domestic violence. The resources available to help them rebuild are fragmented, expensive, and often inadequate." I outlined my vision: an integrated platform offering business mentorship, career training, therapy resources, legal assistance, and community support. The business model was sound, a combination of subscription services, corporate partnerships, and government contracts. But more than that, it filled a genuine need in the market. The women who use Phoenix Rising won't just be survivors, I concluded. They'll be leaders, entrepreneurs, and mentors for the next generation of women facing crisis. You're not just investing in a business, you're investing in a movement. The panel's response exceeded my expectations. Sarah Martinez, CEO of a regional investment firm, leaned forward as I finished. "In 30 years of evaluating business proposals, I've never seen someone turn personal trauma into such a clear and viable business model. This isn't just smart, it's necessary." Within 2 weeks, I had secured initial funding of $250,000 to launch Phoenix Rising. The validation was overwhelming, but more than that, it felt like vindication of every difficult step I'd taken since my wedding night. The first Phoenix Rising office was a modest space in a converted warehouse downtown. 3 rooms, exposed brick walls, and secondhand furniture. But it was mine, built with my vision, and funded by people who believed in my mission. Carmen was my first hire, bringing her experience from our support group and her own journey of rebuilding to the role of community outreach coordinator. Dr. Reyes agreed to serve on our advisory board, and several of the women from our Tuesday night group became our first beta testers. Our initial services were simple but comprehensive. We offered workshops on financial literacy, business plan development, and personal branding. We connected women with mentors in various industries and provided resources for legal issues related to divorce, domestic violence, and workplace discrimination. But the heart of Phoenix Rising was the community we created. Women who came to us broken and isolated found themselves part of a network of survivors who had transformed their pain into purpose. The Tuesday night support group expanded into multiple weekly sessions, specialized workshops, and eventually an online platform that connected women across the country. 6 months after opening, we had served over 200 women and had a waiting list for our programs. The local newspaper wrote a feature story about Phoenix Rising, focusing on the unique approach of using lived experience as the foundation for business expertise. "Traditional business schools teach you to minimize risk and avoid failure," I told the reporter. "But women in crisis have already experienced the worst-case scenario. We teach them to use that experience as their competitive advantage." The article brought national attention, including an invitation to speak at a women's entrepreneurship conference in Chicago. Standing before an audience of 500 women, sharing the stage with established business leaders, I felt the full weight of how far I'd traveled from that broken girl in a wedding dress. Success brought unexpected challenges, including renewed contact from people I'd left behind. Raphael reached out through a mutual acquaintance, claiming he wanted to make things right. Aline sent a series of texts, alternating between apologies and accusations, asking for a meeting to clear the air. I ignored them both, but their attempts at contact stirred up emotions I thought I'd resolved. Dr. Williams, who had become both a mentor and a friend, helped me understand that their sudden interest in reconciliation was likely motivated by my public success, rather than genuine remorse. Narcissists are drawn to successful people, she explained during one of our monthly coffee meetings. Now that you're building something impressive, they want to be associated with your story again. It's the same manipulation, just with a different angle. The real test came when Isabella, Raphael's first wife, reached out after seeing the newspaper article about Phoenix Rising. She was planning to move back to the East Coast for work and asked if we could meet in person. Meeting Isabella was like looking at an alternate version of myself, what I might have become if I'd never discovered the truth about Raphael, or if I'd never faced my own crisis and found my strength. She was successful in her own right, but there was a caution in her eyes that I recognized from my own mirror in the months after the wedding. "I've been following Phoenix Rising online," she said over lunch at a quiet restaurant downtown. "What you've built is incredible. I keep thinking about how different my life might have been if something like this had existed when I was going through my divorce." Isabella's validation meant more to me than any business success. She represented the road not taken, the life I might have lived if I'd remained trapped in Raphael's web of manipulation. Seeing her healing process reflected my own journey and confirmed that the work I was doing mattered. "I want to help," she said, as our conversation wound down. "Whether it's consulting, mentoring, or just sharing my story. What you're doing is too important for me to watch from the sidelines." Isabella became our first remote team member, developing a program specifically for women recovering from narcissistic abuse. Her expertise in marketing and her personal experience with manipulation created resources that filled a crucial gap in our services. 2 years after opening, Phoenix Rising had expanded to serve women across 3 states. We'd helped launch over 150 small businesses, supported 300 women through major life transitions, and created a network of mentors and resources that was being studied by business schools as a model for social entrepreneurship. The success brought speaking opportunities at universities and business conferences. I found myself on panels with established CEOs and entrepreneurs, sharing insights about building businesses from personal adversity. The girl who had once felt voiceless was now being invited to share her voice on national stages. But the recognition that mattered most came from the women whose lives had been transformed through Phoenix Rising. Maria, from our original support group, had started a catering business that employed other women in recovery from domestic violence. Jennifer had earned her nursing degree and was working in a pediatric oncology unit, bringing her own experience with rebuilding to families facing medical crises. Carmen had been promoted to regional director, overseeing our expansion into new markets. Sometimes I look around at what we've built, and I can't believe it started with a group of broken women meeting in a church basement, she reflected during one of our quarterly planning meetings. The financial success was gratifying, Phoenix Rising was profitable and growing, but the personal transformation stories were what drove me. Each woman who found her strength through our programs validated the pain I'd endured and the choices I'd made in response to that pain. 3 years after the launch of Phoenix Rising, I received an unexpected email from Sarah, the college friend who had chosen to believe Raphael and Aline's version of events. The subject line was simple: "I owe you an apology." In her message, she explained that Raphael had recently left Aline for another woman, a pattern I could have predicted. Aline, now a single mother struggling financially, had finally admitted the truth about their affair and the systematic campaign they'd waged against my reputation. "I feel sick about how easily I believed their lies," Sarah wrote. "You were my friend, and I should have trusted you. I've been following Phoenix Rising, and I'm amazed by what you've accomplished. I know an apology doesn't undo the damage, but I needed you to know that I see the truth now. I stared at that email for a long time before responding. The vindication felt less satisfying than I'd expected. I no longer needed external validation of my truth. But Sarah's apology represented something important. The acknowledgement that my version of events had been accurate all along. My response was brief but genuine. Thank you for reaching out. I've learned that the people who matter will recognize truth eventually, and the ones who don't weren't meant to be part of my story anyway. I wish you well. That same week, I learned that Raphael's business had failed, and he was filing for bankruptcy. Aline had moved back in with her parents and was working at a retail job while raising their child alone. Part of me felt satisfaction at their downfall, but mostly I felt grateful for the distance between their chaos and my peace. Dr. Foster, my oncologist, had declared me fully in remission after 5 years of clear scans. The cancer that had once seemed like the final blow to my already devastated life had instead become the catalyst for my greatest transformation. The disease that was meant to destroy me had instead revealed my indestructible core. Today, Phoenix Rising operates in 12 states with a staff of 40 employees and a network of over 500 volunteer mentors. We've served more than 2,000 women and helped launch over 800 businesses. The company has been featured in national magazines and studied as a case example in business schools across the country. But the numbers don't capture what Phoenix Rising really represents. Proof that our worst moments can become the foundation for our greatest achievements. Every woman who walks through our doors broken and leaves empowered validates the choice I made to transform my pain into purpose. I kept one memento from my wedding day, not out of nostalgia, but as a reminder of who I used to be and how far I've traveled. It's a photo my father took of me getting ready that morning, full of hope and completely unaware of the devastation awaiting me. That girl's innocence was about to be shattered, but her strength was about to be forged. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have looked like if Raphael had been faithful, if Aline had remained a true friend, if the fairy tale had come true as planned. I would have been comfortable, probably happy in a conventional sense. But I never would have discovered the depths of my own resilience, or the power that comes from rebuilding yourself from nothing. Cancer taught me that I could survive anything. Betrayal taught me that I could thrive after losing everything. But building Phoenix Rising taught me the most important lesson, that our scars can become our strength, and our pain can become our purpose. Raphael and Aline gave me the greatest gift they could have, though they never intended to. They showed me who I really was beneath all the roles I'd been playing. They stripped away everything I thought I needed to be happy and forced me to discover what actually mattered. I am no longer the girl who believed in fairy tales. I am the woman who creates her own magic. I am no longer a victim of betrayal. I am an architect of transformation. I am no longer defined by what was done to me. I am empowered by what I chose to do in response. My name is on the door of a thriving company. My story inspires women across the country to rebuild their lives after crisis. My voice speaks at conferences, and my words appear in publications read by thousands. But more than any external success, I have something that Raphael and Aline's betrayal was meant to destroy. I have myself, whole, strong, and unbreakable. The phoenix rises not despite the fire, but because of it, and I am still rising.